In this presentation, I'm going to present this document and the material that it supports. It's called Getting in Step, a Guide to Effective Outreach in Your Watershed. This is an example of how the whole concept of watershed science, watershed planning and management extends substantially beyond just a single scientific concept, or it extends beyond science in general. In fact, this document is about how to take the ideas, results, goals, etc. of a watershed project and get them to be understood and recognized by the community. That process is called outreach, and this document provides a very nice summary of outreach. Outreach and education are powerful tools that can be used in watershed protection efforts, etc. I'm not going to go through this whole document in complete detail. However, I am going to highlight some of the most important aspects of this document and try and tell you somewhat along the way why it's important to consider outreach. And this will help to speed up your process of reviewing this document as much as you feel necessary later on. Really, developing an outreach plan is something that is done in many different areas and in many different subjects, and all of those subjects tend to frame an outreach program in a similar process, a similar group of steps, such as is shown right here. Steps 1 through 6, defining goals and objectives, identifying a target audience, creating and packaging a message, which are fairly closely related, distribution of the message, and finally, as any good activity does, to conclude with an evaluation of what has been attempted. On this page right here, there's a description, which I'll summarize for you, of goals and objectives, which are really two different things, although you commonly hear somebody says the goals and objectives of this are, as if they're the same thing. They're really not. A goal is a broad general statement that expresses a desire or a statement about a value of the watershed, whereas an objective it should be much more specific, should be action-oriented, and should be measurable. So there is a difference between goals and objectives. They are related in that goals tend to evolve into objectives. One starts with goals at the conceptualization phase of an outreach plan, and then eventually those goals become objectives so they can be implemented, measured, and evaluated. In the green box here we have a sample goal, which again is a wish or a desire without very much specifics. Continuing further along, we can see in the yellow box how that particular goal might have generated one or more, in this case several, objectives, which have numeric character, are able to be linked to specific actions, can be are measurable, and finally can be evaluated as to whether or not they've actually been achieved. Another step in an outreach plan is to identify the target audience. Who specifically does the watershed coalition or the watershed group or whatever intend to communicate the message to most specifically? There are 4 characteristics, so to speak, that define how one can identify an audience based on geographic location. Is one thing. Obviously, people who live in the watershed are much more important as audience than people who don't live in the watershed, but one may even consider sub-geographies within the watershed while choosing a geographic aspect of the target audience. It's also important to consider the demographics. just what age distribution, for example, may be meaningful. Occupation, what people actually do and what their activities are, and expanding upon their activities, what are their behavior patterns? What do they do? How do they behave? What are they used to doing in the watershed? All of these four are ways in which one can parameterize the characteristics of the audience that they'd like to target. So in the green box, we've moved upward to talking about a target audience. In this case, I'm personally not sure why this one was chosen, but it does show the process. Senior citizens and high school students have been targeted, perhaps because they're two groups of people who maybe are idealistic, have extra time, have the ambition to do something useful, whereas most working age people are just trying to get through the week. So that may be the idea behind that selection of a target audience. Some more information in this document about that. The next thing that becomes that we're going to drift into is more ideas about finding information about the target audience and how that might be done. For instance, mail surveys are pretty common, less so as internet and other things have supplanted mail. A mail survey is a way to gather information about people's interests and desires and their availability to perhaps even help with the work of the watershed. Surveys are also useful tools for a different objective, and that is to provide publicity and provide information. So in a way, a mail survey can serve several tasks. That's one way to find out information about a target audience. Phone surveys are more and more frowned upon as time proceeds, so they're becoming less common. But it is a way to gather information, perhaps also to irritate people. So I tend not to include that in any plans that I do. Focus groups are interesting, and focus groups are ways to gather information about people and what their interests and willingness is to participate. Focus groups can be either formed by direct invitation to specific people, or by a broad invitation to the whole community to see who is interested in showing up. Public agencies are also extremely useful organizations to help find out about the community and the community needs and who might best be target audiences. Public agencies such as County Planning Department, County Environmental Health, etc., who know a lot about the needs and characteristics of the community. Trade associations are also useful. There's a lot of very, very potent technical knowledge and information that's usually part of any trade association. And one could also consider looking at demographic databases such as a GIS of the latest census. Step 3 is to actually create the message, and creating the message means basically identifying what tone or theme or persuasive methodology that the group intends to use in order to communicate with the public. You can use various ideas such as efficiency or time and money savings or be a good citizen. That's basically the message, and that's kind of like the first part of creating the message is the general way in which these ideas can be framed, so to speak. So that's so in this green box, we've gotten several of the steps completed. The goals, objectives, target audience, and the message. And the messages may be somewhat different for different demographics or different target groups. Senior citizens, come on over if you have some free time, make a difference. High school students, here's a chance to maybe get high school credit or to fulfill your science project or your IB project or something. So those are examples of messages. I'm going to break this video now as and call this part 1, and return to this in part 2 at this same place.